Hi there, Chris here with another fresh tip for you all. In this video, we are going to continue our work on the Warmaster Titan from Adeptus Titanicus. And in this video, we are going to work on the armor panels for the legs. And so as you can see here, we have them all separate. They've just been given a prime of Stano Res White with a Badger Patriot 105 at around 25 PSI. And we're going to use Mechanicus Gray. Mechanicus Standard Gray. It's regular Citadel variety, so we're going to use some MIG ammo thinner just to thin the color out. Basically, I just use a brush, slap a little couple dollops into the airbrush, and then it's basically a mix of almost a 1-to-1 of thinner to paint. And basically, we're just using this to base coat the entirety of the armor panel. So you can see here, I change the directions, catch the odd angles here and there, but otherwise I give it a straight base coat onto the paint. And again, I'm using the regular Citadel paint, which is, it's really no different than the airbrush paint. It just has, thinner body to it. Really, it's not like it's, special formula or anything like that. It's just extra thin paint, really. Any airbrush paint is just thin paint. And so I really wouldn't get caught up in, what kind of paint I'm using or brush I'm using. It's not really the point of all these videos. And, it's a pretty straightforward process. I left these panels off so that I could, address them individually and, so that we could get to all the little nooks and crannies. Administratum Gray, regular Citadel variety. You can see I throw a little, about 3 drops of paint, match it with medium, thinner, the MIG ammo thinner, and then I use a long bristle brush to mix the paint in the cup of the airbrush. Still sticking with a Patriot 105, still spraying it around 20 PSI. And in here, I'm basically going to build the brightness up towards the bottom portions of each of the panels. So I know which way these panels align on the model. And basically, we're going to build the brightness up. Now, these are the thigh panels. And so on the lower portion of the thigh, it gets brighter, but also where the part where it gets right onto on the hip joint, I also throw some brighter color onto those. But these ones here are like on the shins. So we go about halfway, but allowing a gradient to build on each of them. And I slowly build up. You can see here, we're speeding through our process here, but really this is just so that, you can see the full process on what I did, but it's not terribly important. I mean, like, you could also 2-brush blend this or layer these highlights in and what have you. It's not terribly important. We're going to jump over to regular old Uthrang Gray. We're going to use Anarchy Models stencils here. This is their HS16 creature. It's a model pattern, and with the Uthrang Gray, we're using our Patriot 105. I do believe we're sticking with the Patriot 105. Yeah, we're still sticking with the Patriot 105. And with this stencil, I basically just hold it by hand as close to the bit as I can. It does have a curvature. So basically what ends up happening is I do want to hold it as close as I can to the surface so that it will render it as sharply as possible. If you're further away or there's quite a bit of a gap from the stencil, it gets a little bit blurry. It's a little out of focus, if you will. Now you can use that to your advantage at some points, but here I do want to have these little mottled patterns, sort of, really kind of in sharp, definition, as it were, on these surfaces here. Now these are a thin plastic stencil. They do bend and everything like that, and I do show bending them to conform to some of these surface, but otherwise and the patterning on them is really quite random, so you can kind of just use whatever bit you are using, and you can move it around, and you don't have to worry about lining them up or anything like that. On these thigh panels, I lay it on the bottom portion, and I also lay it on the knee joint, or the hip joint, I should say, excuse me. But basically, I'm going for this mottled pattern. Now, anybody who caught the first part of this video, you might have an idea on what kind of color scheme I'm going for here. And if you haven't figured it out, well, I guess you have to stay tuned to figure out what kind of color scheme I'm going for this Titan. But as you can see here, again, it's just really, really simple. It's just using the stencil to create this effect, this mottled pattern on the surface, and getting more on my fingers than I am on the model, actually, but that's okay. I'm not too worried about it. And because we have the paint so thinned out, we can, really kind of build to the gradient We're going to use Basilicum Gray Citadel Contrast. We're going to jump over to our Renegade Chrome. We're still spraying at around 20 psi. And with this, I just wanted to build a little bit of color depth and just some little bit more depth. And with this hip plate, this is the inside portion of from the hip plate coming down on the thigh. And so I just wanted to lay a little bit of shadow in there, and also where the plate at the high point of the hip. I also wanted to lay some deeper color there, and because it also catches on top of that Uthran gray layer, I'm fine with that. That creates a bit more depth there as well. I also concentrate some of the color in the middle of the panel, so that once we attach it, it gets a nice deep shadow inside there. And I didn't really want to use black for any of that, so I just basically just lay it on there. I do it on the shin plates here on the high points and on both sides, essentially. Not so much on the front, but a little bit more heavy on the inside part. Now again, the inside portion is not going to really be seen that well, so I'm not really that concerned about highlighting and whatever there. Ultramarines Blue from Citadel Contrast, and I'm using this here for the trim of the armor plate. And with this, I'm using contrast because, well, with the Ultramarines Blue, it does cover very well. I'm not too worried about it doing the contrast thing where it gives me highlights and lowlights. I just want something that's going to flow nice and readily and allow me to basically cover over these details with very little hassle. Basically, as long as you got a nice sharp pointy brush, you can accurately get around those edges. And we also do the outside edge as well, the portions that kind of face outwards. Calgor Blue is next. This is going to be our highlight. Basically, we're going to use Lamian Medium, and we're basically just going to use this as an edge highlight, really. And with this, we're going to go around the entire perimeter of the detail and also pick out the little rivets and also those little details that come in from the panels. We're going to apply an edge highlight to those as well. Now, I don't really quite show those on camera just because it was a little bit tricky, and my big fat hands were in the way in some of the shots, and so you're just gonna have to trust me. That's what we did for these. And here you can see the edge highlight all the way around on that blue detail, picking out the rivets and all those things. Again, just really straightforward. It's nothing terribly fancy. Again, with this, we're just aiming for a tabletop. We're going to use some Fenris Gray, slap it onto the palette. Just the dampness of the brush is fine. Going to use our nice sharpest detail brushes we can find. And again, we're going to do another edge highlight, but with this highlight, we are applying this to the high points. So it's going to be going to corners and those little arrow details that go in on the panel. It's really just at the tip of the spike, as well as catching the tops of rivets and such. So it's really straightforward. Again, we're not, painting this for display or anything like that. We're just simply going to get this ready in tabletop. And because this is such a complex model and there's so much to go through, we don't really have time to really kind of, concentrate too heavily on, rendering everything out at the highest possible, shading and highlighting and all that. We just want to get this guy done, but make something looks kind of interesting. Again, hopefully some of you guys already know what color scheme I'm going for with this. If you do know, leave a comment down below. Again, it's pretty straightforward. The high points, the inside curvature, and of course catching the rivets and the little arrow things that come in. And we're just, catching the tops of those and everything like that. For the shin armor, we're going to go back with the Averland Sunset and use a little bit of Lamian Medium. We're going to slap a little bit onto our palette. I'm going to give it just a drop of the medium. It's less than a 1-to-1 ratio for anybody who really needs to know that information. We're jumping over to our base coating brush, and very carefully we are just going to use this and apply it to all the trim of the armor panel. I probably could have used something like a Floyd as well, just to kind of help me kind of get that contrast vibe with the paint so that it flows into the nooks and crannies of these areas. I'm not sure if that would have really helped me out, just kind of thin the paint out. And because I have the paint in a thinned out fashion as it is, you could see there, we do have to apply this more than once. So I think it is about 2 layers I apply. I didn't really stress like more than, like 3 layers or anything like that. Just because I knew I was going to come over this with more colors and everything like that. So after 2 layers, you can see we got a nice layer going on, and basically we'll move on from there using some more Screaming Skull. We're going to use some Lamian medium, and with this we're just going to apply a edge highlight, kind of like what we did on the other panels. And it's the mix ratio is less than a 1-to-1. It's more paint than it is thinner, of course, and again a very careful edge highlight to all the details. With this edge highlight, I am going to go around a majority of the details of this trims, but otherwise I'm going to concentrate more color on the high points of each of these plates. Where these little Gothic arches are, that is towards the toes, so I do know which way I'm putting my highlights. So again, do consult your manual as far as when you are working in sub-assemblies, and do bear in mind what parts are where and the orientation and all that. It'll save you some heartache once you get to the assembly phase. But we are a long way off from that one. The final assembly, that is, not this phase, because after we're done with these, we can slap these onto the model. So after that edge highlight onto these armor panels, we're going to jump back over to the Iyanden yellow, and with this we're going to apply this fairly generously, so it's straight out of the brush. I just use the brush and wipe it onto the palette just to kind of pull a little bit of excess color out, just so that it's not swimming on the details. But then after a while I said, you know what, I'm just going to let it swim on the details, because I want those rivets to jump out. I want a little bit more shadow on those, so I do apply this over the entirety of the trim details, allowing to sit on top of that Screaming Skull layer, and that's giving me a brighter yellow and giving me that nice little edge highlight around a majority of these areas, and again giving me more saturation with a little bit more color depth, and making this look a little bit more visually interesting and not so ham-fisted with the color, and just kind of we're just trying to go a little bit further than not painting it at all. We're jumping back into the Agraxer shade, kind of like what we did with the legs. We're basically slapping a little bit onto the palette. I use a generous amount of water to thin the color out, and then I basically apply this over the entirety of the yellow. Because we have it in a thinned out state, it does flow into the recesses without overly saturating the main surface areas of each of the details, so that we're not changing the overall value. But again, we are looking something that's a little bit close to what we had done on the legs, but I'm okay with it being a little bit brighter, just so it stands out from the legs. And also, if you're careful and everything like that, you basically get a little bit of a dark line from the panel as well, so it creates a little bit more separation from the main mottled portion of the armor and the trim detail. Next, we're going to jump over to Hexios Pale Sun. This is the Citadel Dry. We're going to use a large dry brush for this, making sure that most of the paint has been removed from the bristles, a lot of the paint. And then very carefully here, I'm using a downward brush stroke here just to catch the top edges of the details. And I'm concentrating most of the color in the forward-facing portion of the armor plate. Just an aesthetics choice, and again it's a downward brush stroke, so we're trying to catch most of the upper portions of details, and this also catches some of the rivets and all that, but otherwise it's a fairly quick. You can see there we just got just those edges, we brought it back to that nice bright tone, and that is basically it for those armor panels. You can see here we're ready to go. We got those armor panels, and basically we're going to slap those onto the model and move on from there. Big thank you to my patrons. Without their support, these videos would not be possible. If you're considering Patreon support, click the link in the description below. There are various tiers to support, and a huge, huge thank you to everybody who does. Take care of those brushes, and they will take care of you.